Okay. So hi everyone. Yeah, it's been some really interesting calls last weeks. I really enjoyed the flow, the flow of energy, and I'm thankful for all of us for holding the space continuously. Containment and continuity are two different C words that helps us to see things more and more clearly. Um, the more we see the whole, the more we see the many parts intertwined and connected with each other. The more we see the parts, then we get to see the whole, and each of us holds a big wholeness. Each idea that we look at holds a big wholeness. So we all really play an important part. Where you're at, where you're listening from, actually holding a really big part. This comes clear in the moment, but also in time. It will come to you later on where, okay, now I'm understanding more and more, sometimes through the experience, sometimes through spontaneous intuitive moments. We're going to go into something different today. Fanny is going to help to hold a big part of today's call. Actually, maybe a bulk of it. I will conduct an introduction. Um, it's really quite rare that we can go into the very, very deep parts of inner dance. That is, the inner dance is not just a workshop. It's not just a thing that we do. It's not just a thing that's containable. Like, one of the questions is what happens when the inner dance takes place outside of the session. For me, inner dance isn't really a workshop or a session. The workshop is a container that allows a consciousness to be shareable, something that could be scalable, something that could experience a spread. Um, but beyond or beneath that, inner dance is still actually a consciousness, and this is something we're interested in. This consciousness is there. It's always been there. Historically, we could actually talk about how this consciousness has been hidden. There's a whole history in which we've been actually very afraid of this, so that now this is coming out into the open more and more. Something is shifting. We are moving away from very old fear, um, and that's coming because of experience. This experience is on the way. It has been on the way. It's eventual that we come back to our original state of being. But at the same time, it's also because we're really beginning to understand like who we are. Um, so we are this energy, and there's something about this experience that has to do with the expanding of the mind and the remembrance of the true nature of the body as it truly is, as an energetic oscillator, an energetic flow. Um, so there are just three basic sections of an outline that I'll go over in just 30 minutes. And then we will turn things over to Fanny. I've been talking to Fanny about this moment for a couple of months now, actually, that it would be interesting for us to hold a conversation around the inner dance where someone might have gone really, really deep and was able to come out of it to surface after being submerged. For me, that's actually really healing because I've watched quite a number of people go really deep. And in the early years of inner dance, there wasn't as much understanding of this, so that a lot of the terminologies and a lot of the contexts that are held are simply very spiritual, like only spiritual. Right now, I wouldn't say it's not spiritual. We are holding a big range of communicative expressions that cover both spirituality and science and everything in between those two, that sometimes seem polar. But in the beginning, when the inner dance was regarded as a mysticism, when it came out in newspapers and radio programs, television reports, the way people described it wasn't always easy to explain. And when I say some, I would say like some dozens out of tens of thousands that I've seen. Some people have gone really deep. They've gone into the deep end. And here in Maya, we've been holding the Eco Village space in a way that can help to hold some of this depth, some of the deepness, in a way that people can really allow themselves to go deep without the pressures of what it means to be in the world, that doesn't allow some people to go deep. And sometimes when you go deep, there could be like strange, interesting things that are so out of the normal. So with Fanny, she went through a really deep experience, like last year, or was it even 2 years ago? This last year. And it happened in a way that we could actually hold it in conversation, the kind of situation that might trigger even us, to think that, okay, this isn't just deep, this is like way, 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 way deep. There's something in the situation that held a very high degree of strangeness, but also intelligence, so that there could actually be a conversation within that space where normally language totally goes out of the window. Language, mind, and okay, so let's start. This is a topic that's always been strange to bring up in inner dance. I started to realize how important this topic was when I began to look really deep into it on a scientific level. Historically, the first person I actually ever facilitated was an epileptic. Um, he was a young boy, he was 13 years old, and his parents told me about his case, where during full moon, he would just disappear, run off into the forest, and then they wouldn't find him for hours, sometimes even like a day. Something happens to his mind. So they asked me to work on him, and I did, and it was interesting. I don't have that many memories about that, but I've had a chance to work with other people who had supposedly this disorder, and it's not difficult to realize that what we're doing is actually to invoke the same energy that epileptics experience when a seizure happens. So especially in this group Earth, there are these sharings from some, especially like in the womb room, where it seems like something starts to come as a presence, and that presence seems like, like in the form of an entity, the form of a creature, the form of a being. When you look at the etymology or the roots of the word epilepsy, um, the word seize comes up, like something seizes us, or even attacks us. Um, Something takes over, um, and so the contexts upon which epilepsy used to be described as purely of a spiritual or religious nature from the ancient times, from Mesopotamia, from Babylon, from Egypt. This is already being documented. So in a way, it was actually called a sacred disease up until the Greek time. People have been documented to be experiencing this, and the normal explanation in the past was that the gods were seizing a person, the divine was seizing the person. But beyond that, one common interpretation is that the demons, the devil, the bad spirits, the nature entities are taking over people. So there's a lot of ancient fear that is around this topic, which tells us that so much interest coming into this phenomenon now, where people are actually wanting to experience this thing that used to be hidden, pushed away, that used to terrify humans. What's happening now that people are in fact wanting to invoke the same energy that used to be terrifying. So yes. Oh, so sorry about that. Yeah, I've been on the Prezi, but I haven't been sharing my screen. Okay, so okay, so I started with that. I was talking around that, and I pressed that when I began to speak about this topic, and the word seize, seizure. So let's go here. No, sorry, no, I want to stay here. It was at the time of the Greeks that there was a significant shift from the religious interpretation of epilepsy to a possible medical perspective. Hippocrates was the first one who started to propose, as the Greeks were beginning to learn more about the human brain, um, that there is such a thing as the human brain, and that it possibly has something to do with electricity. Then from the religious and superstitious and spiritual definition of the term, we started to become interested in epilepsy being something to do with the body, as a body condition as well. So in a way, the medical system has also been looking at this for a really long time, for thousands of years. And it's been seen definitely from the problematic point of view, where epilepsy has so much to do with losing not just control of the body. When an epilepsy occurs, very often people lose the ability to express, to speak, and then the mind blanks out. So for sure, this triggers some of the deepest fears in humans, because we don't like losing control of any of these factors. So as far back as during the time of Hippocrates, in the work in the work on the sacred disease, it's very interesting to note that when sufferers are going through a seizure, there's a lot of shame already back then. Um, So people were not allowed. This wasn't permissible. Like this thing that is beginning to happen more and more across the planet. This was this would bring the sufferer into uh, you know emotional attack. They could be judged. Basically, they could be seen um, as something to avoid. So I think this is important to bring up at this point, that we are in fact healing not just our bodies, our fears. We're healing our shame of this possible phenomenon where electricity flows through us. Um, could lose control of the body, and there are different uh, perceptions, phenomena. There are these different experiences that come up, a lot of which we might have experienced ourselves. The moving of the body. I've already spoken about some of the symptoms earlier, but this is from still the Hippocratic corpus. That way back then, all of these symptoms were already being carefully classified or categorized, and this is something we'll go through more and more, not just today, but over the next months. Okay, so just to quickly jump into things, we bring up aphasia because they go together. When epilepsy happens, an aphasia could happen, just like in inner dance. When people go into the inner dance process, there are these moments where it becomes difficult to access our normal language capacities. And when I say language, there are different dimensions of language. It could be about like expressing oneself. Um, Often people either lose their words or they go into like a light language space where they begin to speak in baby talk. So it's interesting that the same phenomena that takes place within the medical observation also takes place in the spiritual observation. And there's actually structure. We would have to look at this. I invite us to look at this because they bring about possible structures in inner dance, without which we could just generalize that it's all energy surges and they're all one. There are actually bipolar tendencies within epilepsy that are polarities that exist also in the inner dance process. So there are basically two types of epilepsies. One is called the focalized, and the other is called the generalized. Focalized would mean that synchronization is happening in just one or two brain lobes, and that could be a specific type of energy experience as well. The body would, let's say, experience more of the kriya type of thing, where it becomes really physical usually when there is a focalized inner dance. It could be very emotional, very personal. In a generalized seizure, the experience in epilepsy can be very different from a focalized seizure. Synchronization begins to spread. So the experience of electricity isn't happening in just one or two brain lobes. It can spread throughout a larger section of the brain, even the whole brain. So the the difference between focalized and generalized is awareness is kept within. So even when things are happening in the body, there's awareness that stays. And when there's a generalized seizure, um, very often like awareness is lost. So people suddenly they're not here. And I would bring connection to a lot of the experiences that people have been having, laying down to the playlist. This is something we've been demonstrating. This is the reason why we're sharing different historicities of conducting the vibration with you, so that sometimes the experiences would be very body based, more physical. Sometimes the experience is not at all to do with the body. It becomes more interdimensional. And then either people say, okay, I fell asleep, I passed out, I went to another space, I went into a dimension I'm not familiar with. So it's actually interesting that we can hold people's brains using these tools, these techniques, these modalities. So this is something we've been experiencing and practicing in the inner dance community for some years now. And so then when we read or listen to the sharings, they often come out in the inner intensive. They're very much matching with a lot of our insights and findings that we've been, like certain playlists we are used to hearing certain manifestations, and it's the same with this current group. So this is just to share that there is a reason why those why there's so many different varieties of experience, but in effect there's actually technically only two. So language. So in aphasia is a supposed disorder of the brain where people lose aspects of their language. And there are two different possible ways aphasia could take place, where time or space could be more severely affected. So when space becomes the affected region of the mind, in that type of aphasia, it becomes harder to name things, to define things. So, for example, if you wanted to to talk about, let's say, food, or going to the bathroom, or traveling to another country, just let's say sticking with the first example, I say, okay, I'm hungry and I know what I want to eat. It's the thing that's in between the two bread patties that has the thing in the middle that's like a dead cow, but I can't really describe it. Sometimes it has like lettuce in it and a pickle, and they, it's in fast food restaurants, and you know, it's very mysterious why that could happen to some people's brains. But it's almost in a spiritual sense, like the word doesn't hold the true essence that is so much bigger within the sound that we make to describe a hamburger, or like a toilet, or like an airplane. So the same thing does happen in the process. I've sat with so many people in so many groups, and people simply cannot translate the energy into words. It just is not possible, precisely because they had gone into the part of the brain and the mind that it's before the invention of naming things and categorizing things and creating taxonomies and creating boxes and containers for pure substance. So that's called the selection problem, or the substitution problem in aphasia. Another type of aphasia that also happens in the spiritual sense is it becomes really hard to combine words. So there are people who experience, I call this like the Yoda syndrome. A lot of you probably know Yoda. He's a character in Star Wars. He's supposed to be the most powerful Jedi, but strange does he sentences combine grammar not right. He speaks way this that so words order follow not. That's a kind of aphasia as well. And when people experience light language, they're doing the same thing. It's just that they're not experiencing the difficulty of combining the words. They're experiencing more of this it's not a difficulty, it's actually the freedom to recombine old combinations that they're tired of and wish to liberate themselves from for that moment. So one thing happens in space, combination happens in time. And these are two dimensions of us, of our psyches. So that space, going to space, reforming our hold or being held in space usually has something to do with the self, like forming a self-concept. This is one of the reasons why we let go of our the structure, the architecture of our space. It's because space does hold the way the library is organized, so that the self is then intertwined with the otherness of all the others that the self orbits around, or orbits around the self. So that if we wanted to change, were we to become like a baby again, to be childlike, we have to rearrange all of the relationships between the self and all the others that allows the self to exist. So we go into the early formation of the self, adopting once again a new self concept before new identifications would orbit around that self. So this is one of the reasons why that does happen functionally in the spiritual experience. When we achieve a spiritual awakening, there is a reason why we go into that possible avenue. So that's not really necessarily an aphasia. Aphasia is something we started to use because of this noticing of just how many people were losing their language. I just noticed this in the early years, where people would be moving, they would be in the zone, they would be in the knowing, they just couldn't speak. But in a way, they actually knew more than they normally would when they were able to express. So there seemed to be something about language that was limiting us, and there had to be some cessation of accessing language so that the deeper meaning could be conveyed. Um, the within the combination problem, which is more to do with time, the opposite of this being more about the formation of the self, there could also be this extreme sensitivity to others. Um, I can't put it into so much words because it would require like a lot more time and a lot more space. But just let me tell you that there are certain effects in the process where we become so highly sensitive. You might say it's overwhelmingly sensitive. Uh, that does perform some functions as well in terms of allowing us to realize just how much we are products of the outside world. That the projections of consciousness is in a way also aspects of ourselves. So that to form a new psyche, a new persona, we would also need a new way of relating with others. So it's not really just about like ourselves. And so vocabulary and grammar would describe the linguistic values that holds time and space. Suddenly new words, new concepts, new ideas, new terms come to you and they seem to hold resonance. There are certain things synchronistically that keep coming up that seems to hold like a lot of meaning, and that would help to structure the new architecture of the mind, the body, the brain, spirit. Grammar is really more about like rules. Grammar comes out of the rule creating necessity that 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 it takes to organize like a mind and the society. So to achieve a grammar, you need to have the vocabulary units. So the more you incorporate okay, these new ideas, this one I like, that one resonates, the more you take that in, the more you can actually play around with it. That means that you can create combinations from selections. So these are reasons why sometimes we need to lose time and space as we used to know it, so that once we gain new dimensionalities of such, we can experience these different possibilities. I think in epilepsy, I wanted to just simply show this, going back to this slide. A focalized seizure is a synchronization that's happening in one brain lobe only. Generalized is when electricity flows throughout the whole brain. So when you do look at this, this is what a focalized seizure looks like. And these types of movements are being seen in so many workshops and sessions around the world. This is what a generalized seizure looks like. Sorry, what's that echo? Okay, this is what a generalized seizure looks like. And probably this is what you look like. Even as children, this happens to people. In the Philippines, we call this tulala. You know, this happens. Sometimes you're talking to someone and then, you know, you're having a conversation, they're present, but suddenly they're kind of looking behind your back and then you've lost them. So they've achieved a certain brain state that is in fact a common epileptic phenomenon that isn't always diagnosed or understood. Staring into space, suddenly becoming absent, is in a way a generalized synchronization of electricity that undergoes a spread throughout the brain. So that could be an effect of a playlist. So sometimes people, even in here in intensive earth, you know, some people, okay, this one makes me more spacey. This one triggers my body more. This one helps me to calm down more. This one arouses me more. So I'm not putting one over the other. It's interesting that there are different types of these two that would become structures for us to observe and look at over a long period of time. So yeah, in so many words, or not so many words, this is the playlist as we might conduct it in linear time. So when we simply combine songs one after the other, then we achieve a certain type of epilepsy or certain type of inner dance. And then when we learn to hold the energy more in layers, in space, not just in combinations within time. And this, it's not so conceptual to you anymore because we have been sharing playlists with you to demonstrate how it would be if we stacked so many vibrations in any one point in time. Even though there is a sequence, every point is holding more. A lot of you did get struck with, okay, this is different. This is not something I'm used to, and this is drawing out different experiences that was unexpected, when a lot of the what people might have been used to is more of this. So that would define the experience to either be something very personal, something very emotional, something coming out of someone's biography to come through, which is really important. It's valuable, it's valid. And then how to hold something beyond just what the ego is sometimes holding, that could be repetitive, that could be cyclical, that could be perpetually there, that isn't always easy to let go of. What does it mean to bring about a remembrance of the cosmic, the planetary, the objective, and not just the subjective. So it took a long time for us within the inner dance community to see a lot of these possibilities. These are introductions to what could go so much deeper. We would study I feel like I skipped something. This one slide, I think it's here. Ah, yes. This is very important. Okay, so go back to this. There's so much judgment, so much fear around this. We see as a problem, and when the disorder or problem comes up, it's something to be solved. So when we do look at who are in history experience this, when you look at this list, a lot of the people who have changed the world were similarly experiencing the things that you might have gone through or are currently going through now. So when you look at the first name there, supposedly the most heralded genius of our age, Einstein, having gone through a lot of these interesting tidbits about epilepsy and aphasia, considering Einstein was going through seizures in his lifetime. The Einstein syndrome is something I bring up. Question mark though, like, so why does it happen? Why does the mind and language take a break? momentary or long term, when electricity surges through us. Primarily when the corpus callosum starts to host the traveling of electricity between the two hemispheres of the brain, language areas are affected. So the Broca's area would be like this red part over here, and that's responsible for language production. So when you have electricity washing over the Broca's area, we cleanse the patterns, the habits, the the conditionings, the programmings that are stuck there, either through family systems or culture, going to school, whatever the programming was, we momentarily wash it, not with water, but with energy. And that's one of the reasons why people cannot speak. And then the Wernicke's area would be somewhere around here, somewhere between the parietal and temporal lobe. And Wernicke's area is responsible for language comprehension. It's the opposite of production. Broca's area is about like producing sound so that you can convey your meaning, convey your intention. The Wernicke's area is more about understanding the words people are saying. There are many people who go into the spiritual awakening and they're literally listening to someone make sounds, and they're like, that sound doesn't seem to connect with the meaning they're making. They just hear sounds, but they can't really. It sounds like a word, a sound word, but it doesn't. It stops to mean things because language, in a way, is bound by linearity. So when we do enter the right hemisphere of the brain, and the Broca's and Wernicke's do exist in the left hemisphere, we go into the nonlinear state where language of speech isn't always able to hold. Um, where's the? There's still something here. Where did I hide it? Maybe I didn't make an actual slide, but what I did want to say is that when you think about Einstein in this way, I've read many articles about this. It's unknown when he did begin to speak, but his parents were really worried because supposedly Einstein only began to speak at the age of 4. I've read some sources that says 5. So he wasn't speaking at all, supposedly, until the age of 4. And then he wasn't making full sentences until the age of 5 or 6. And then when he started to really speak at the age of 7 and 8, he did it with a lot of care. He did it with a lot of meticulous methodological care. He didn't just speak for the sake of speaking. It's almost like he was drawing from a very nonlinear energy field. So there is a lot to say, I think, about losing one's language momentarily, from Einstein's point of view. And Einstein was a huge lover of music. He felt that music holds the key in unlocking a lot of what is here. I think he intuitively understood inner dance in so many ways. I think we're very expressive, and sometimes we need to learn to listen so that our speaking comes from this deep listening space, and somehow this thing that we're experiencing, this inner dance process that we're experiencing, is helping the brain to access, as it flows through time, like a lot more space. So I think we're here. This is really where we're at. We are at the junction point between genius and terror, and that humans will be invited to either enter into very, very deep states or to control. That this is really what it's about. We know that this is not what it's about. There's like a lot more. So especially when you study the eugenics movement that was taking place a bit more than a century ago. I don't know, was it 200, 150 years ago? It was a generally long movement, and up until now we are still experiencing that. When some humans took the the teachings or the ideas of Charles Darwin around natural selection. There was this idea that we need to cleanse the planet of like crazy, stupid, not so productive people. So sterilization means sometimes taking out the fallopian tubes of mothers who are so-called feeble-minded, so that we could just have smart, intelligent, amazing people. And some of the people who were targeted, maybe even the majority in some places in America, in Europe, especially in America and Europe, epileptics were targeted. They were chosen as ones who had to go through cleansing. So they weren't, a lot of them weren't told. They were put into these communes, and they would undergo these operations. They would be hidden from public. There'd be thousands upon thousands per place that was provided, so that we didn't have to deal with them. They lost the chance to have children. What we're actually finding out is possibly the opposite is true. Electricity could be the pathway to heightened states of knowing rather than lowered states of cognition. This is important because there's usually like a cross-sectioning or a transition from one space to the next. And when you're undergoing a spiritual awakening, or this could apply to when you're holding the space for others, when this is happening and there's a lack of understanding or lack of contextualization, there could be that awkward, not understandable space where it seems like there's just this overwhelmed state where I don't know anything, I can't speak about it, I don't understand. What would be a way of holding a person so that like this next stage, this next level, this next dimension could come through, so that what seems like a baby or like a toddler, like a child, could become this super brain, this super intelligence. Okay, so that's it. That's my intro. I will now give the flow to Fanny. Thank you for listening.